And we are live. Welcome to another episode of Business Focus Live with me, John, where we talk about business related topics as well as news from here and around the world. If you're new to this channel, don't forget to subscribe and let's get started. And we're back. Thank you again for joining today. So today is August 19, 2022. So we'll be talking about a lot of interesting things that's been going on this past week or so. So without further ado, so let's see our topic of discussion for this week. None more so than the first one. I don't know, it's a very important one, but nonetheless, Disney, the company, which is has a lot of products and services that they're offering, is planning to increase their price, in particular their streaming service Disney Plus here. Now, what's the rationale behind it? Will customers be affected in as much as, will it stop them from subscribing to Disney Plus, or will it continue to grow because of increasing demand and so forth? Next, we'll be talking about Huawei. Interestingly enough, is still selling smartphone devices, but it's not no surprise here that their sales is dropping. So we'll take a look at that as well. Next, we'll be talking about in the finance industry, which is kind of interesting. They need more managers. So what's the problem brought about this shortage? And we'll take a look at that as well. Some local news, which is pretty interesting. So our government, in particular the Department of Information Communication Technology, DITC, uh, has a lot of unused laptops or tablets which is supposed to be used during the pandemic, which is kind of moronic that they are not able to do this, which obviously during this juncture that schools are trying to resume into a face-to-face setup, and what happens to those unused devices, and will there be any consequences because of that? And lastly, stay tuned for the end when we discuss a very interesting monitor. So if you're a gamer per se, you'll be interested to see this new Samsung curve monitor. It's called the Odyssey Ark. So we'll talk about that as well. Anyway, so for our first one, as mentioned, so Disney, the company, the having the streaming services mentioned, movies, even the theme parks, even TV networks and whatnots, is looking at an opportunity. Obviously, good for them, but for the consumer, by raising its price here. And according to CNBC, that mentions Disney is raising its prices, but this time don't blame fresh inflation. So meaning it's a strategic move on their part that they're intentionally increasing the price because of demand for their products and services. It mentions here, Disney is raising the price for ad-free Disney Plus and Hulu. Now, obviously, Disney is trying to compete with the giants such as Netflix here, and they made a lot of headway in terms of where they are just a few years ago, way back in 2019, 2020, to where they are now. They're really putting where their mouth is in trying to in terms of competing in the streaming services here. And it seems so that the demand is so high. A lot of new subscribers are tuning into their content that the company is taking advantage of the supply and demand here. In this case, there's plenty of demand with limited supply, so they can increase the price, and customers are still paying that price here. What's interesting, price increase will also be coming at theme parks as well. So that could be concerning if you're, an avid traveler who frequents their theme parks all over the world. And again, another opportunity for for them to reap the benefits of being one of the very few companies who have a very successful theme parks around the world, not just in the United States. You have in Europe, in Asia as well. The fact that in the United States alone, they have two main Disney theme parks. And then in Asia, you have in Japan, in China, in Hong Kong. So that's a plenty. And then you have Euro Disney as well. So people are still, traveling, going, visiting their theme parks despite the pandemic or the easing of the pandemic. And obviously, going to theme parks is not an enjoyable experience if there's a congestion of a lot of people. I don't know if this is an excuse for the company to increase the price, but to limit who is allowed to visit the place or visit their theme parks as well. Anyway, the CEO, Bob Chapek, is hoping the Disney brand will be able to support its price increase, which is obviously for a customer, that's never a good sign if companies do increase their products or services unless it offers significant value here. And obviously, if you continue to subscribe to their streaming services, you deem that the offerings that they have, some good, some not. Overall, you have a overall good experience. Same goes for their theme parks as well. Anyway, let's take a closer look. So this is increasing its price on its streaming services as mentioned earlier, and could hike also its theme parks as well. So Disney Plus is now offering without ads for a measly $10 or $11 way back in December 8th. Will increase it by $1. I sorry. Hulu ads will increase by $1 to $8. So Hulu without ads will jump $2 to $14. So obviously the increase is not pretty significant. That obviously up to a certain point, customers will complain if you hiked it too high in terms of the price and value here. And obviously the main problem here is, yes, they're gaining a lot of subscribers here, but the question here is how many of their subscribers are actually tuning in, watching their content, and how many of those 100 million plus subscribers are actually going to hold on to their subscription in the long run here. And uh, another competitor who's having problems right now, it's not significant, but it's a growing concern if I were in charge in Netflix, in terms of we've discussed it before that they've been losing subscribers in the tens of hundreds of thousands, projected to have even at least 2 million by that much in just a few years time. And obviously, based on the demand, they're trying to take advantage of the situation here. Now, it was mentioned here that the price increase will likely happen at theme parks as long as people keep on coming in droves. And the key word here is people keep continuing, visiting their theme parks, which is very popular. And with the lockdown that happened past few years ago, obviously people are starting to, get to some normalcy. That's the right word, in terms of getting back to what they used to do before the pandemic. And one of those is traveling within the country or around the world, visiting popular places. And Disney theme parks or Disneyland is one of those very popular tourist attractions as mentioned. And what's interesting is obviously the company, according to the CEO, mentions that we read demand and we have no plans right now in terms of what we're going to do, but we operate with a surgical knife here, which just language speak for taking advantage of the data that they've collected in terms of how many are still visiting their theme parks even at the height of the pandemic. A year or two after the pandemic, people are still visiting their theme parks. And the question here is, if you increase the price here slightly, would it affect the number of visitors in their theme parks? I'm guessing it's not. The fact that they're confident in their statement in terms of the CEO, not just the ticket prices, but also the merchandise that they generate and the products, the content, the themes that they've invested heavily, especially the Star Wars franchise as well as the Marvel's franchise as well here. Anyway, he goes on to mention it's all up to the consumer. If consumer demand keeps up, will act accordingly, meaning they'll keep on spiking the price until such time they get a backlash from their consumers that As I mentioned, I have no problem with companies increasing their price as long as the value of their products and services also grows proportionately with what they're trying to do here. But sad to say, many companies nowadays are trying to increase the price, but yet doesn't provide any value, minimal or even worse products or service in their business model here. And obviously, the rise of cost of materials, labor, gas is due to inflation is part of doing business, and it's not just a theme park, and they can claim to increase the price in their streaming services. And according to data, Disney Plus had added 15 million new subscribers in the last quarter alone. So meaning blowing their expectation here. So growth is expected, but will it be able to capture or reach or take over where Netflix is right now? Uh, Disney Plus next quarter beyond the 6 million it added in its fiscal third quarter. So it's still a long ways off to reach Netflix, but they're making a lot of headway here in terms of providing stiff competition with Netflix here, and obviously other companies, studios like Peacock, you have Paramount trying to reach their disease levels, but they don't have the cachet in sense in terms of the catalogs of content and being able to invest produce a lot of contents for their subscribers here. It's not just the theme parks, the streaming services where they're making a lot of headway. It's also their networks, TV providers, and one of the studios that the networks that they own is the sports network ESPN, uh, which is primarily focused on sports per se. So you have baseball, MLB, you have American football, NFL, you have basketball, the NBA, you have hockey, NHL, and so forth. So capitalizing on their preference or maybe the dominance in that market, being able to charge more in terms of knowing they're the only major sports channel in town. So taking advantage of that is very advantageous for them. Now, uh, the CEO mentioned that they have experienced his share of bumps in the road. He's saying over for Bob Iger as the Disney CEO. But one thing hasn't changed. Consumers still enjoy what Disney is offering, and I think knowing that gives them confidence that they can keep on churning out, whether it's streaming content, movies, continue to provide their theme parks all over the world here and capitalizing on their popularity as well. But obviously, the brand has shifted already from what Mr. Walt Disney envisioned his company was to be and to where it is now, has gone a lot of transformation. Some say for the betterment, some say for the detriment of the company, because the essence of what makes Disney is not what it used to be anymore. But we'll have to wait and see what will happen to Disney the company in the very near future. Anyway, continuing. So as mentioned, it's very interesting that the company Huawei is still in business here, despite the sanctions that's been levied upon them, despite the trade war between China as well as in the United States. Now, according to TechTimes.com, Huawei sales decline as company grapples with U.S. sanctions. So they're still here. They're still trying to uh, continue their business, whether it be smartphones and other businesses. Interestingly enough, here in the Philippines, they're still selling their hardware in terms of smartphone devices and laptops and tablets. I've seen many of their retail stores, but the question here is it enough to support or to sustain their business, especially in a very competitive, very advanced, or you have to be innovative in terms of providing your technologies here, whether it be the smartphone all the way to your laptops and tablets as well. Anyway, it mentions here the equipment smart maker sales has declined by 14% from January to March compared to a year earlier. And as it pumped money into research and development while grappling with the U.S. sanctions. Now, obviously, research and development is important for any tech companies to stay competitive and stay in business. But the problem is politic issues can hamper your growth as well, which is what's happening right now. And having limited market and one of the main dominant markets that Huawei can sell outside of China is either in the United States or North American region as well as in Europe. But obviously that times have changed now. And what's interesting, how bad is their sales? It mentions here, according to Wall Street Journal, the Huawei technology said its revenue was 131 billion yuan, or close to $20 billion in the first 3 months of 2022 this year, compared to 152 billion yuan, or 22 billion a year before. So it's slightly lower than last year, so which is never good if you're doing business. So it's mentioned here, the net profit margin for the quarter was a little over 4%, which is down from 11%. So that's double. That's a very steep decline compared to the year before. And obviously, the changing chairman from Ken, who said the figures were in line with the forecast, which is never good, unless that issue with the trade war with both countries subsides. Obviously, it's going to hamper the growth of the company as well. Now, interestingly enough, who said their consumer business was heavily impacted? Yes. And their ICT infrastructure business experienced steady growth. Now, obviously, Huawei doesn't just provide smartphone technologies to consumers, but also infrastructures for network telecommunications all around the world. And the issue with data privacy, hacking, and so forth is a very hotly contested issue here. And the continuing being traded in the blacklist of restricted American companies from doing business with major network communication equipment and smartphone provider is a big blow for the company here. And the sanctions that have hit hard, especially if it relies on Google, and Google is an American company here, so obviously Google wants to be on the good side of the government rather than go against it. And obviously the decline of Huawei, which used to be one of the top three companies, smartphone companies outside of Samsung, Apple, and Huawei, and they've already slipped beyond, I think, fifth. Yeah, fell out of the top five brands. They have other Chinese companies that's already surpassed them. You have Oppo and Vivo, I think, just to name a few, which is never a good sign here. But the question is, how long can they stay in business with this current situation here? Now, thinking that this is backed up by the Chinese government, I think they will still continue to do business in their own domestic market. But in terms of foreign markets, we still have to wait and see if they can stabilize, and unless they can come up with their own OS that would support many of the apps that we've come accustomed to, then that's going to be an uphill battle, because there were reports before that they had an OS, but that doesn't seem to get any traction here, which is kind of disappointing. And it would be interesting to have other alternatives as outside of the Apple App Store. You have the Google Play Store, and then that's it. And making it difficult for other companies to compete with those two companies. That's why the monopolistic or oligopolistic or duopolist nature of those companies makes it hard for other companies to provide, a compelling or competitive service as well here. Now, the company has since invested heavily in research development, spending as much as 142 billion yuan, or close to $22 billion, in developing new technologies. What the heck was it? What the heck? What that was it? Eh? What the heck's the word? Eh? Wait, where's the word? Where's the statement I was reading earlier? Yeah. So as mentioned, they've heavily invested in the R&D, but obviously, you need to be able to sell a lot of units to be able to recoup all of your investments here. So developing new technologies to carve out new businesses areas that is less vulnerable to sanctions. Maybe they could shift to something outside of the smartphone telecommunication segment, then that would be viable for them. Now, Huawei's research and development spending is 22% of its sales, so outpacing rivals such as Samsung and Apple, which is remarkable in terms of what they're able to do, because being able to churn out, more better and better product than the year before that they did. Imagine if they still had access to the Google Play Store, then they'd be in line to be one of the top smartphone makers in the world, sanctions aside. Now, the CEO, Mr. Hu, has said that Huawei's commitment to developing new business areas like cloud computing and 5G is on the way. So we'll see how far Huawei will go. Will they still be in business in the next 5 years or in the next decade or so here? Anyway, shifting to the finance industry, which is kind of interesting here, that according to Reuters.com, it mentions here that the industry is needing more working class managers. There are a lot of vacant positions that many of you could be interested, especially if you have background in finance, that you would be inclined to apply for these types of openings. Now, what shifted? Why is there a sudden urge to get more working class man? Why particularly working class? It's kind of boggling. So let's take a closer look here. So what's interesting here? How come is there suddenly an exodus of finance managers leaving in the industry for whatever reason? So let's take a closer look. Anyway, financial services, as mentioned here, should set stretching targets for appointing people from working class backgrounds to senior positions. A UK government sponsored report. My question is, why do you need to appoint a specific work class? Isn't a position be based on the qualifications, the merits of the individual, if they're supposed to be in that position? Now, obviously, you want equal opportunity for everyone, to give everyone the chance, but obviously you only pick the best person, whether it be a man, woman, or whatever race or whatever backgrounds, to be able to do the job effectively. Now, what's interesting here, the finance industry is already making efforts to appoint more women, black, and ethnic minorities onto boards and into roles like chief executive and chairs, but target for socioeconomic backgrounds that have featured less in corporate diversity efforts. Now, I have no problem giving everyone an opportunity here, but trying to emphasize, let's say you want to have an equal number of, whether it's gender, race, socioeconomic backgrounds, and so forth, could be convoluted and could be counterproductive for the business, because at the end of the day, the business that stays at the top, that becomes more successful, is you get the best people, regardless if it's a male or male dominant centric gender. Because if it's predominantly female, then good for them. If it's predominantly male, then it's good for. If it's a combination, I think it would depend on the type of business that you're offering. Obviously, in let's say in fashion, it would make more sense that there's more female employees there than, let's say, male. Then let's say maybe I don't know, maybe in warehousing, business, that tends to be predominantly male here, and obviously in managerial. So that would depend on, based on your criteria or their experience, on their expertise, that if they would suit or fit the needs of the companies here. Now, it mentions here a task force commissioned by the government and led the City of London. Corporation surveyed more than 9,000 employees across 49 financial and related professional firms, and found that the sector is out of kilter with society. Well, there will always be it will not always be equal to all professions, because if you're talking of managers here, you have to look across all boards of profession to say that if you want equality for everyone, then you make sure everyone has an ample opportunity, or would it be better to get the best people for that particular job here. Now, it mentions here the task force said that 49% of all level seniorities in the finance industry were from a professional background. rising from 64% of senior leaders. And for UK population as a whole, 37% of working people are from professional background, which is okay. Now, socioeconomic background can amplify other inequalities, particularly related to ethnicity and gender. Now, obviously, there can be prejudices or, what do you call this? Discriminations because of other races. But, obviously, if you're the best for that job, then everything else would not matter. And if that's the criteria for the companies that they're looking for, then maybe it's not the right job for you anyhow. Because wants to work for a company that's only focused on, in this case, a particular segment, so that they can be perceived as providing equal opportunity, but that doesn't necessarily reward people if they're the best at that particular field. So here we have working class employees who are also female or an ethnic minority are even less likely to hold senior level position and less likely to feel included in a workplace. Now, I think it's one thing to espouse equality for everyone, but I think transparency is important so that everyone knows who gets the position and how the position was filled in terms of requirement, qualifications, metrics that benchmarks that everyone can compare that in terms of, let's say, in a certain benchmark, or who has the highest scores. Now, it may not be ideal, but it's better than not no basis at all. And whoever has the highest scores based on that metric, then should be rewarded in terms of being the best person for that job, whether it be a minority in terms of gender or race and whatever, right? And it's interesting that they emphasize that white men on professional backgrounds account for 45% of roles, while compared to 23 of their female counterparts, while just 13% of senior roles are filled by white men from working class. Now, obviously, to rise the ranks, it's never easy, and you have to have that understanding qualifications to be able to meet that requirement. And using data here just to spell out that yes, there is an imbalance of professionals here uh, in terms of gender. Yes, but the question here is, are all women gearing up to be in senior roles here? And obviously, for the difference of gender, that's why in a setup between, let's say if you're married, typically the female counterpart, if you have a family, would always prioritize family over career. That's why you'll tend to see a diverge in their careers. That's why in my case, if my wife were to consider pursuing his professional career, then if I have to settle back, then I'd be fine with it. But if we were to reverse our roles, if I have to take a more leading role and my wife would to take a lesser role, which is also possible. But if we were to have the same professional career, it's also possible. But regardless of the setup of your marriage, it always depends on what you prioritize. Is it career? Is it family? And obviously, you have to make sacrifices in a sense that you cannot have both successful careers and don't have any consequence in terms of child upbringing or having a harmonious family relationship, especially if you have several kids at that. And obviously there will be a consequence as to that. Now, in terms of profession, obviously you want everyone to have a equal opportunity who will be vying for a particular position, as long as they're qualified, regardless of gender. I think it should be promoted. Now, in terms of the data they show here, obviously there are many other factors that they didn't mention why there is a slanted demographic in terms of more towards male and female. And think about it, the more successful you are in a corporate ladder, from managerial to executive management, yes, you tend to hold higher positions, but at what cost? You're too preoccupied with business tasks, spending more and more time in the office, in the workplace, dealing with organizational problems on a daily basis, lesser time for your family. And obviously, for the difference between male and female, there are always a tug and pull. Who's taking the lead role? Who's taking a secondary role? Or are they working hand in hand here? And obviously, just stating out imbalances can be misleading as well here, and that can obviously incur the wrath of a lot of people. And understanding the data behind it and context behind the data is always crucial here. Now, it mentions here also that the survey defined working class as having a parent working in a routine and manual occupation, so such as receptionists, van drivers, plumbers, and electricians. So the lack of inclusion from working class backgrounds poses a risk to employee retention and productivity in what is already a tight UK labor cost. But again, when you consider, working class, it's very monotonous based on the profession that's mentioned. From a receptionist, you just sit all day waiting, dealing with people comings and goings, and van drivers, plumbers, and electrician can be monotonous. And you want them to ascend to a more managerial role, then they have to have a program or a step that would get them from point A to point B. And obviously, a van driver can be a senior van driver in charge of multiple van in operations, but obviously you need a different set of trainings. And an electrician cannot be a CEO here, because obviously the electrician is very specialized, very skilled profession. Not that it's not lucrative. In many parts in the world, plumbers are very sought after. Here in our country, it's not a glamorous job, but in other countries, they're paid handsomely for their services, because if your plumbing goes awry and no one can get it fixed, it disrupts the whole dynamic, not just in your household, but also in your workplace as well here. Now, according to Catherine McGuinness, she mentions that the data provides a robust baseline by which the sector can begin to track its progress to socioeconomic diversity and address gaps. Now, again, the misnomer here is trying to provide equal opportunity, I think, is important, but trying to address that there should be equal diversity across all boards can be disastrous if you think about it. Imagine that in a very dangerous workplace. Very rarely do you see any, like, for example, if you're a fireman, that you see a lot of female in that segment. If you want across all boards, then you have to do it across all board, but that will never succeed. Imagine in military. That's why for the longest time, majority of our soldiers are male, because of the inherent risk, the dangers, and the physical toll that it entails. And you may notice that many of the more dangerous jobs, men tend to hold those services. And on the flip side, caregiving services, health. That's why in hospitals, there are more female-dominated professions there. So it's a different preferences. So there's always differences here, but obviously giving chance to everyone in every spectrum would be ideal. But obviously, that's a longer discussion than we can have here. Anyway, it mentions here that according to KPMG, one of the first company to set targets for staff from working class backgrounds to help close the pay gap and diversify its staff. Diversity is always important, but it shouldn't be the main reason for a company that they just focus on that aspect. Obviously, you want to get the best people regardless of background. Whether, let's say, you're starting a company, you're looking for the smartest and the brightest, whether it be sales, finance, marketing, administrative positions, and whatnot. Doesn't matter what backgrounds do they come from. But again, what are the groundworks, or what are the standards that you set upon your employees so that they be given a chance here? So it's not just a somewhat rhetoric. You only include certain groups of people that you're familiar with, that you know with anyway. Continuing, so for some local news, interestingly enough, when we're talking of governments here, especially our governments here in the Philippines, during the pandemic, a lot of majority of the schools or education system had to be shut down and do an online setup. And one of the issues that props up is obviously access to facilities and having the right equipment to be able to do your job effectively. And so, providing internet service is important. having laptops and computers or even tablets is important. What's interesting enough in this article, according to Zappler.com, it mentions interestingly enough that many laptops and tablets devices that is gathering dust that's worth close to $100 million pesos, which is not being utilized. So what's going on about this? And obviously, many of the students would have benefited, especially faculties that's having a difficult time as it is. It's not being utilized properly. So let's take a look at what's happening here. Now, according to the Department of Information and Communication Technology, they purchased those gadgets way back in 2020-21 under the Cyber Learning for Education program, which is a noble idea. But the problem here is, after purchasing those laptops, they did first determine who should be the beneficiaries of said. Well, again, that's a very, callous decision making from the government of just buying and, in terms of the price. Did they overbid for those devices, and not using it can be catastrophic, because obviously those students could have benefited for this, or even the faculty as mentioned earlier. And as you can see here, they bought close to 900 laptops and close to 12,500 tablets, so close to 93 million pesos, and it has been undistributed and unused for the past year or so, which is obviously, there's no harm to those devices, but obviously those devices can, if not used, could be damaged, could be outdated already in a few years time. And will people still be able to use it? And I don't know what our government is doing about it. And what's interesting here, according to its COA, or Commission on Audit, way back in 2021, mentioned that the gadgets might become obsolete, which is reasonable enough, because every year, manufacturers keep on churning out new and better devices here. If this were not distributed to students and teachers soon. The gadgets were purchased, as mentioned, a few years back, and 550 million undertaking, which piloted in the cities of San Juan and Makati and Metro Manila. So why are they not being utilized? Under the project, 10,000 laptops were procured, but 800 of them bought, 32,000 remain undistributed. So they are able to distribute majority of it, but there's still I won't say a large amount that's not yet utilized. And why not give it to students so that they could use it? There are a lot of schools that don't even have the right facilities and right equipments to begin with, let alone the technologies that we're talking about here today. And then there are 41,000 tablets were procured, but 12,000 still, price ranging from 5,000 to 5,400, are also still with the ITC. So what's going on here? I mean, a year has passed and no one has decided maybe we need to find a way to distribute this. Or for those who have not yet gotten those devices, I'm sure there are far more people, students in far-flung places in the provincial area that doesn't even have electricity, would benefit from those devices here. A lot of red tape, bureaucracy is always the main culprit here, not communicating with different departments so that it can be expedited, so that those people who are in need could actually get some use out of this, rather than collecting a lot of dust in some warehouses here. Now, it was mentioned by the COA that management failed to identify beneficiaries for the CLE project prior to the acquisition of laptops and tablets, resulting in a low rate of distribution. Well, again, planning would have been nice before they even procured it. While they were procuring it, shouldn't they have planned this? Who was supposed to get or receive those devices once they've collected? Because they had to create a budget, right? Once they create the budget, they had to indicate how many will be distributed. Let's say for nationwide here, how many will be distributed in Luzon, Visayas, Mindanao, and if it's Luzon, which regions, which district, and so forth, which barangay, and so forth. And same goes for the other regions as well. And they could have done that in I think a few days if they were to really put their minds into it, so that by the time they have already collected all of those devices, once they purchase it, they could have distributed much more smoothly, and we won't have any wastage here, which is what we are encountering here. Now, according to the COA's findings, they mentioned that the project manager of the CLE explained that they had not released the devices as the intended destination either didn't have the designated contact person or have yet to evaluated if eligible. What do you mean not eligible? If there's a school that needs those devices, if the facility is not up to par, then maybe they could have benefited from it. I'm sure there could be a lot of things they could have considered rather than playing coy, not making tough decisions, and doing something about it, because at the end of the day, it's a wasted opportunity here. And what if they were to distribute the remainder of the items and still there were defective parts because of not being used during those times anyhow. Anyway, the DITC also found that users in pilot areas preferred laptops over tablets, since laptops have larger storage for application and data used in school. And again, deciding buying the right equipment for usage should have been studied carefully, and not just whimsically deciding, maybe we need to buy laptops and tablets. Laptops would be more functional, and obviously laptops has the ports needed if you're going to use a projector, so that the entire class could benefit from it tremendously, having Wi-Fi internet, being able to insert, even let's say if you have an SD card slot here, so it has more functional uses rather than a tablet. Now the tablet would be beneficial if you're distributing it for all students here, which I don't think they're going to do that here, which is, I don't see the reason why they should. If not the laptops, maybe a desktop computer would have been more sound, because you can buy or construct a more powerful desktop PC that could be used more efficiently here. uh, and when COA asked why the DTC went on to procure the device when it had yet to identify the recipient, which is a good question. Well, without initially identifying actual beneficiaries, the procured units may be more than the recipients, resulting to oversupply and overstocking. So again, meaning their budget for planning is way terrible. This is something you don't want to follow, because if you over plan, over budget, then you spend close to 100 million, could have bought something else that could have benefited the students in the long run here, which is kind of disappointing, which is a common problem here in our country. I'm sure it happens also in other countries as well, which is kind of very disappointing at the end of the day here. Anyway, for our last topic here, to shift our discussion again, on something more interesting, technology based. So if you're a gamers per se, obviously having the ideal setup, a very powerful PC and having all the peripherals is important. None more so than the monitor that we're all using, because this is where we see, where we conduct our productivity or even games per se. So here, Samsung is offering something very interesting. A curved screen is not necessarily new, but how big the device is pretty significant. I think it's around 55-inch. So let's take a closer look. So it's the Samsung Odyssey Ark. So it's a raft of gaming display. So it may look in the screen that's pretty small, but no, it's pretty big. It's 55-inch screen, so it has a large real estate here. The fact that you can put 427-inch screens in your monitor, would be interesting here, and it's pretty hefty. And what's interesting here, shout out to the Apple monitor stand that cost $1,000. Here, it's included in the purchase of the monitor here. Anyway, let's take a closer look what its unique features. So as mentioned here, it's fast and bright, and it has multi-view features, maybe equally appealing to you. So as mentioned, that's right. So it's a 55-inch curved monitor TV. So it has 4K display, 165 hertz refresh rate. So if you're into FPS type of game, this would pique your interest. Now, obviously, the price tag alone would scare a lot of buyers here, and so only serious gamers with a lot of pockets of money to spend. So costing close to 200,000 pesos here in our currency. It's pretty interesting. Anyway, so the details of this is, so the 55-inch 1000R curvature is a one way to go about sticking out. So meaning it's protruding side to side in a sense. So what's interesting here, has some smart functionality. The Samsung Gaming Hub that allows for cloud gaming, streaming via Xbox Game Pass, Google Stadia, and Amazon Luna. And has the Samsung M8 Smart Monitor. It runs the Tizen OS, so it can stream apps like YouTube and TV Plus itself. Actually, what's interesting here, uh, so the picture and picture mode offered by my TV some monitors. The Arc includes robust screen manipulation setting that let you go from basic stack your four windows as mentioned. Sorry, by to 2 by 2, or the niche if you set it by 32:9 ratio, or one traditional 16:9 input here. Actually, what's interesting here, I was able to see a video which was done by Linus Tech Tip a few weeks back, I think, or a few days. I forgot how long ago, where he was showcasing, which is a sponsored video, wherein he showcased the monitor. It's a pretty gargantuan, has a lot of uses, but I don't know if it's practical in itself here. So let's take a closer look here. There you go. So you can see here, it's a pretty significant large screen, and obviously being able to multitask, use different parts of the screen, and obviously being able to game is very interesting. So you can see here, having a large screen is very interesting. But let's see if let's see here. So having a pretty big, I think for me anyhow, having a significant, the larger screen, obviously you have to stand back, and I don't know, 55 is, I'm not comfortable, using the screen that's 55-inch that wide. Maybe you have to move backwards a few feet, be able to do that. And one of the interesting things that Linus is showing right now is being able to tilt it into a horizontal matter that, I don't know, it's more on for commercial use rather than for productivity use, because obviously stacking it with multiple screens side by side would be interesting. But what I forgot to show you when Linus was showcasing it is the stand here. It has to be very sturdy because the monitor itself is pretty hefty. So building a very robust stand is important, and I commend them for doing a spectacular job. So being able to rotate it and not worry that it would tilt, either move back and forth here. So I think that's pretty interesting, and it's a good talking piece if you have it in your living room. But in terms of personal gaming, I don't think I'd be that comfortable. Maybe right now I have a 27-inch monitor. I'm happy with the size. Maybe I could go to a 32-inch, maybe 40-inch, but I think that's asking too much unless you have dual monitors here. But still, I think for a productivity standpoint, I think 27-inch is more than enough. And here you can see that using the screen at different functionalities, it has its own set of remote, is pretty interesting as well here. Let's see here. Maybe go and skip here. So obviously at the end of the day, it's all about the gaming, and obviously it looks spectacular in terms of what it's able to do. And the refresh rate is, I think it's very important. So if you're very particular in that, having a high refresh rate, 165 refresh rates, it's not bad. And you're going to have an enjoyable experience, a very immersive experience at that here. Now obviously the issue that you're going to encounter right away is the price factor here. The fact, if you can spend, if you have a 3090 at RTX 3090 at home, then maybe you can spend a few more $1,000, $1,000 more in terms of investing in your PC as well as in your monitor here as well. Now, will it be available here in Asia? We will have to wait and see here. Actually, I want to show something here before we conclude here. So in the article here, you can see here that how the monitor is being used as a stack. Maybe you could use this if you're a stock trader, so you can see multiple screens here. So you have different dashboards here. You're doing something at the bottom screen, then you have two different screens on top. I don't know if it makes any sense, but you can stack it multiple monitors. Let's say you have 3 or even 5 monitors. So you could do it in your office, maybe at home, and create. Maybe you connect all of them, so you can create a 555-inch screen. That would be nice. The price tag would be enormous, but it would be would be an interesting concept here, having 5 curved monitors stacked side by side, on the curve concept. I think that would that would be interesting here. But anyway, obviously it's not for everyone, but it's always interesting to see new technologies, what's on the horizon here. So anyway, I think that's about it for today. Thank you for joining me again. Come back again on Friday for more business focus live videos. You can also check out my other contents. There are very interesting videos that we'll be posting in the next coming weeks. If you have any questions, don't forget to leave your comments down below, and I will try to get back to you as soon as possible. As always, I'll see you in the next one. Take care.